meeting the District of Chetwynd to order at 4:35. And we got the opening statement to be read.
Yeah. As we gather today to conduct the business of the District of Chetwynd, we do so knowing that we are privileged to serve the citizens of this community, and we shall endeavor to conduct our business in their best interests. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. Prior to adoption of the agenda, and that the council meeting be conducted electronically via Zoom due to the prevalence of COVID-19 and the provincial state of emergency.
Motion to receive.
Second.
Okay. Okay, any new items to be added to the agenda? Not seeing any. Minutes from November 2nd, 2020.
Motion to receive.
Second.
Jocelyn, second. Is there any discussion on any omissions from the minutes from November 2nd? Okay, not seeing any. All those in favor? Carried. All right, we've got, is it Fire Chief? Anyone? I guess you're introducing yourself, Don. Oh, it's Golub. Come on, we were going to pronounce your name, and we were going to say it's just Fire Chief.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Yeah. I'll answer to whatever we need to answer to. It's all good. So,
okay.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be your fire chief here in Chetwynd. First day, so Carol was able to have a conversation with me this morning and give me some direction, and then turned me over to Laverne, and then it was almost 2 o'clock by that time. So it's been a busy day, and certainly lots to take in. So really excited to be here, and yeah, can't wait to work with all of you.
Okay, the question I usually ask is, Dan, where are your roots from? What's your background, and how did you manage to land in Chetwynd?
So I grew up on Vancouver Island in a town called Qualicum Beach. I was there as my father was a carpenter. I went and apprenticed under him. We were building houses. I was a Red Seal journeyman carpenter. And then I got involved with the volunteer fire department in Qualicum, and I moved my way through the ranks from volunteer firefighter to the fire chief there. And then the opportunity presented itself in Tumbler Ridge for the fire chief's job there when Shorty moved over to Dawson Creek. So I came up here and I was good enough to work in Tumbler Ridge for 5 years as their fire chief and emergency coordinator. A little bit of bylaw on the side too, so gave me a good scope of work. And then the opportunity in Fort St. John presented itself to as a training officer through the union, and put me on the floor there as their training officer. So I had the privilege of training half of that department as they've seen quite a growth over the last 12 years. And I was a TO for about 10 years. And then the last 2, I was promoted into the position of deputy chief for operations. So I oversaw the fire hall, the apparatus, and the suppression crews. And then this opportunity presented itself. And, you know, I looked at having job in Fort St. John, and it had a transition period there. And I always found working with the volunteer sector, the fire service, the most rewarding, because the people that volunteer for our community and dedicate themselves to their family and their jobs and to us is, you know, quite unique and quite rewarding to be able to work beside them.
Thanks, Dan. Any questions from council?
I just have one. I just have
Laura?
a comment. I just like to say welcome, Dan. It's it's great that you're here, and it's exciting to know that you've worked with a volunteer corps before, because that's what we have, and you're right, they are really important to our community. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. So I look forward to it.
I just have a comment is all. And two, again, welcome to Chetwynd, Dan. And it's a great department, and I'm sure that they're going to be thrilled to have you. So thank you for choosing us.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me.
Not seeing any more questions there, Dan. Thank you for the information that you placed upon us. And being in the north, Tumbler Ridge, Fort St. John, you're quite accustomed of the weather. It's beautiful all year round in Chetwynd, as you noticed.
Yes.
So thank you for coming to be our fire chief. And I see Councillor Warwick has got one question for you.
Hi, Dan. Welcome to Chetwynd. I'm just wondering if you've ever, like in your past, highlighted firemen or anything like that to council. In my tenure of only 2 years, I haven't not seen that, and I think that would be wonderful. You know, an occasional highlight of a fireman, or maybe a new fireman or a fire person. I don't even know what the right terminology is these days. Is that something you'd be interested in?
You know, we're fortunate because in the fire service we're able to acknowledge the services of the firefighters. And as I was going through, you know, a multiple amount of files today, I found one that actually had the years of service for some of our members. And it looks like we've got a couple people with a 30, a 35, and a 40, which I'll make an application for their, if they don't already have their medals, then their 30 and 35 and 40 ribbons. And that's usually presented through council for the recognition of the service to their community. So 100% will be able to do stuff like that.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, just a little bit of information on that stuff. We usually do that at the year end, right, Carol? If you could correct me.
We usually do it at the Christmas party during Land Service Awards, but this year with COVID, we've been discussing doing it a little bit differently. So we still want to honor those people and give them an award, but we'll have to do it respecting physical distance. So we'll come up with something.
Yep. Okay, any more questions for our new fire chief? Okay, thank you, Dan, for coming to see us today. And hopefully by next year, when you're here and you're got yourself established in town, that we could meet rather than through Zoom. Hopefully the worldwide COVID is contained by then, and we'll be able to meet in person and do regular stuff. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing this for us.
Well, thank you very much again. I certainly appreciate the opportunity, and I'm sure we'll be able to see face to face and have lots of good conversations about how we're going to move forward. So,
Perfect.
okay.
Thank you, Dan.
All right. You guys have a wonderful meeting, and I'll be signing out. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dan. Yeah. Thank you. All right, on to we have Matt Thompson, Urban Matters, right? Chetwynd Housing. It's all yours, Matt.
Thanks very much, Mayor and Council. I appreciate you taking some time. I do have a PowerPoint that I'll pull up in a moment. I just wanted to say, I know a draft got circulated earlier. We corrected some errors, so I've updated those in the current PowerPoint that I'll be presenting today, which I will circulate around. But if you have any questions about the data based on the package that you've received, please refer to the report. And there are just a couple of minor typos and errors and a mistranslation of a chart. But I wanted to introduce myself really briefly first. My name is Matt Thompson, and I am the Community Housing Lead with Urban Matters, CCC. We are a sister company of Urban Systems, which has an office in Fort St. John. But we are kind of the social planning arm of Urban Systems, so to speak, or and an organization that looks at social issues in communities and aims to support both through research and policy development, but also kind of upstream policy work with senior government and innovation and social enterprise. And so as a community contribution company, we actually reinvest 60% of any profit that we make on an annual basis back into community projects. Right now, we are working in a number of projects. We have my colleague Julianne Kucherin has been doing some opioid response convening in Fort St. John, but we work on issues as diverse as childcare, response to the opioid crisis, immigration and intercultural communication, and then my portfolio, which is primarily housing work. So I'll walk you through a little bit of what that's looked like, which recently has been a number of housing needs assessments, particularly for the Peace River Regional District and its partner member municipalities. Now, can everybody see the PowerPoint okay right now? So thanks very much for taking time today to hear this. I know this may be the first kind of big update that Mayor and Council have received on this report. I do want to emphasize that the reports are still in draft form, so while largely done, any questions or comments coming out of today's session, we would endeavor to incorporate into the final draft before it's received, which is a legal requirement under the legislation that Council receive these reports in an open meeting. So by way of a little bit of background, these housing needs reports come out of a provincial commitment to address the housing crisis through its 30-point plan that was released in 2017. Through that plan, local governments were able to or required to pursue a number of tools or measures to support better knowledge and better response to housing and primarily housing affordability, although that's not the only problem that our communities face. And so one of these requirements is that all local governments by April of 2022 are required to complete their first housing needs assessment report. To this end, the province and through UBCM provided $5 million in grant funding. And the funds were scaled depending on the size of the municipality. So smaller municipalities got about $15,000, while the largest municipalities got $70,000. But as part of that, regional needs assessments are able to be conducted too. And so the Peace River Regional District coordinated amongst 4 partners, who I'll mention in a moment, including Chetwynd and themselves, so 5th partner, to conduct this regional study with each of the 4 member municipalities and each of the regional district electoral areas receiving their own completed report. As I mentioned, housing needs reports must be completed by 2022, and then they must be updated under the legislation every 5 years thereafter. That being said, the way the legislation is written, there's a requirement to collect quite a large cross-section of data, 50 indicators, primarily from the census, but also from other sources such as BC Assessment and BC Housing. And then required to actually report on about 20% of those. So there are a few indicators that are required, such as core housing need and certain housing indicators, as well as household projections that the province wants to see being reported on. The report that we've provided you aims to be as comprehensive as possible in its draft form, covering off many of those 50 indicators that provide some kind of meaning and insight to the community. But we also recognize that going forward, smaller local governments may not reproduce kind of the long form report every 5 years. And so there is some wiggle room under the legislation to kind of do a shorter form report as an update every few years, and then maybe a longer form report, say every 10 to 15 years. So a couple of things that I want to draw Council's attention to off the bat. One is that much of the required data in these housing needs reports, and this is under the legislation, does come from the 2016 census. We recognize that in a community like Chetwynd and in a region like Peace River, that is somewhat dated. And because of the nature of a cyclical economy, some of the things that were being captured by the 2016 census have now changed, and in some cases changed quite significantly through the region since that 4-year-old census. And so to the best of our ability, we've used not just the data that's available, but also a fairly comprehensive engagement program and a series of household projections in order to attempt to update some of the data. And so while we recognize the limitations, there is some effort to make sure that this is relevant and kind of up to date. And I think also worth really drawing council's attention to is that as a first report, this is intended to provide a baseline. And so every time this gets updated every 5 years or so, you'll be able to start seeing and tracking trends through your community. Regardless of what's happening economically, you'll be able to see kind of what the impacts may be on a population basis or with regards to housing. And so that's just some preamble about the project and about the legislation in general. In turn, these housing needs reports can help to inform a number of planning and policy initiatives local governments may take on, including providing the baseline for any OCP updates, any housing policy that may be developed, regional economic development or growth strategies, or zoning bylaws, and even development approvals when it comes to thinking around what type of housing may be needed. It's also worth noting that nonprofit housing societies do use these quite extensively whenever they're putting together housing funding applications to senior government, whether that's CMHC or BC Housing. And so by having these in place, we hope that they become just documents that can be lifted wholesale into the sections where nonprofits are required to kind of spell out need in the community. So about the broader project, we started this project midsummer, with the pandemic already underway, and so the project was essentially structured around a minimal of travel. I'm actually based in southwestern BC. I live on the Sunshine Coast in Gibsons, and we're working closely with some of our colleagues in our Fort St. John office in order to ensure that we have appropriate local context and both for all of the municipalities as well as the regional district. So from the outset, we've kind of been drawing on a number of different groups to help guide us through the process, both our colleagues within Fort St. John, but also an active working group of local government staff from 3 of the municipalities and the regional district, and also a steering committee that we've met with twice, who are composed of kind of a broader cross-section of stakeholders, including the Oil and Gas Commission, the regional district, and a number of others. Sorry, the names are slipping my mind, but they're intended to kind of provide us with the bird's eye view of what's happening in the region and connect us with key issues that we know are on the radar but don't always have data on. Through late summer, we engaged in quite extensive stakeholder engagement, a couple of focus groups with stakeholders representing both regional and kind of municipal perspectives, and then nearly 30 key informant interviews with First Nations, local employers, nonprofit housing providers, folks in the real estate and development sector, all intended to kind of make sure that we're getting an appropriate and up-to-date picture of what's happening through the region. We also conducted a survey region-wide that I'll talk about a little bit later. And we also have been collecting stories of people with challenges of lived experience in housing. And I believe at last check, we'd gotten about 20 stories that people had submitted online about their relative difficulties. And we were trying to gather from kind of right across the housing continuum, people who are experiencing difficulty finding and maintaining appropriate and affordable housing. Then we kind of undertook to analyze the data, analyze the qualitative data, and put it together into a report through October and November, which you've seen a draft of, or it was part of the package. And we're aiming to finalize once we've moved through these council presentations that we're conducting over the next week or two. We hope to finalize the reports kind of by the end of the year, so you may see a finalized draft coming back in front of you before end of calendar year, depending on schedule, or it could be January. But we have until the end of February to finalize and receive those under the UBCM grant. But once this first round of council presentations is over, we're going to be taking input from the discussions that we've had here, as well as all the stakeholder information that we've gathered and the background review that we've done, in order to do some best practice and policy review. And this is really intended to think about what, based on the local context and the need we're seeing, what might some possibilities, some recommendations for each of the local governments in terms of kind of a top 3 to 5 things that might move the needle or progress the conversation around housing in all of your respective jurisdictions. And so that's kind of our next step coming out of this month's round of council meetings. And then we would anticipate coming back in front of you again with that next report on policy and best practices to discuss then before finalizing. So just a quick review. The participating communities in this project are Dawson Creek, Chetwynd, Hudson's Hope, Pouce Coupe, and then electoral areas B, C, D, and E. Fort St. John is undertaking its own housing needs assessment in partnership with its housing strategy. And Tumbler Ridge and District of Taylor, I believe, are also pursuing their own projects, I believe, next year. So I'm going to just spend the next few minutes talking about some of the data that we've collected while acknowledging some of the limitations. So this slide shows us what population in the region and in the community is doing. And between 2006 and 2016, Chetwynd saw a slight decline in population. I believe, I think we can at least correlate that slight decline, particularly between 2011 and 2016, to a downturn in oil and gas prices in the local economy that occurred around 2014 to 15. And just in terms of kind of updating these numbers, we did get a package of information from BC Statistics that shows, generally speaking, region-wide a bit of a dip after about 2015-16 in population, and then an attendant growth after that, which I think is reflective of current economic conditions. And so the population is projected to return to roughly 2011 levels by 2025. Sorry for that typo there. And the I think the estimated population is currently about 2,630. So some growth coming out of 2016 and moving towards the future. In terms of what the population looks like from a demographic perspective, between 2006 and 2016, there were some shifts that are worth noting here in terms of age groups. One general comment is that the Peace River region and its communities are, generally speaking, a much younger makeup or demographic than we see in lots of other communities across British Columbia. I think that speaks to the kind of economic context, as well as to the fact that some of the more temperate regions of the province are more attractive to older adults who are retiring. Certainly, my own home region of the Sunshine Coast is has high proportions of seniors. And so, what's interesting about here is we see a growth in a couple of different demographic groups in Chetwynd. One, we see fairly substantial growth in the 25 to 34-year-old age cohort. So that means the community is attractive to younger people, and proportionally that age cohort is growing. The other age cohort that's growing is those folks that are older adults but not yet seniors. So the 55 to 64-year-old age group, late career, probably getting ready to retire, grew from 9% to 12% over that period of time. So kind of these two very different demographics. And in many ways, I think this kind of points to a healthy replacement of an older adult population with younger adults, younger workforce over that 10-year period. Compared to the region, demographically, the makeup of Chetwynd is quite similar to the Peace River region as a whole, with a slightly higher younger cohort, that young adult cohort present. In terms of composition of households in Chetwynd by tenure type, about 70%, or just shy of 70%, of all households are owners, and about 31% are renters. And so the community's actually seen a slight increase in the number of owner households between 2006 and 2016, and a slight decrease in the number of renter households, both proportionally and in terms of hard numbers. Just by way of comparison, Peace River region as a whole, which includes all the municipalities, does have a slightly lower proportion of renters and a slightly higher proportion of owners. This slide shows us, it's sort of one of the dimensions that's really kind of key to our affordability analysis, and it shows household income by household type. And so when we think about what affordable housing is, obviously your income is going to be the biggest driver of what you can and can't afford. This slide really shows us that there are a few different groups that are likely to be more vulnerable to expensive housing or lack of available housing in the market. And so while both couples without children in Chetwynd and couples with children in Chetwynd tended to be high earners, earning north of $100,000 on an annual basis, and these are median household incomes. We also see that male lone parents, even as single earning households, are earning quite high incomes, and other census families, that is extended or multi-generational families, or families where there's an unrelated roommate involved. All of those household groups tend to earn quite high incomes or have high median incomes. Where we see the greatest vulnerability, and this is not unique to Chetwynd by any means, it's very standard, is amongst female lone parents and non-census families. And the reason for that is because they are single earning households and at the same time maybe most likely to work service sector jobs that pay minimum wage, and so are not necessarily able to always afford the housing that is in a community. It's also worth noting that single seniors living alone would typically be captured by this non-census family household group. So it's very difficult to parse out income by household type by age. We don't get that level of detail, unfortunately, but we do know that when we're looking at seniors, they tend to fall into this grouping. And so what we see are that female lone parents and non-census families are, because they have the lowest incomes, are most likely to be experiencing housing vulnerability, especially from an affordability perspective. I want to note, we don't have a slide on this, but I want to note that in the report, we also highlight the difference between median renter and owner income, and where owners are, have a median income of about $103,000 annually. Renters earn nearly, or just north of half that, at about $56,000 median income annually. And so, what that's basically telling us is that renters typically have a much lower income and therefore are less likely to be able to purchase. And so they're not necessarily renters by choice. They're renters by virtue of their income. To look a little bit at housing stock in Chetwynd, there were 1,005 dwellings in Chetwynd counted in 2016. The large majority of these, 3/4, were single detached homes, with movable dwellings making up about 20% of the remaining, and some semi-detached homes. Now, this, you'll note, it doesn't add to 100%. There is a random kind of rounding system or algorithm that Statistics Canada uses. And when we get into data sets of less than about 1,500 or 1,000, we start to see some discrepancies in terms of the totals. So that is something that's noted in the limitation section of the report, but just worth flagging here too. So the rounding can kind of impact our ability to add to 100%. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong slide. We had supposed to be in here the age of household or housing in Chetwynd. The text on the right is correct, but the graph is wrong. Most houses in Chetwynd were built prior to 1961. That really sort of points to an older housing stock, and it's worth noting for a number of reasons. One, because it may impact sort of interest of first-time buyers buying into a housing market, either to encourage them if they can get a less expensive home that's older and know that they can renovate it, maybe one driver, or if they're looking for something turnkey because they don't want to invest in a renovation, they may shy away from kind of a single detached home. A single detached home if it's older, if it's built in that older time frame. So moving here into some key housing indicators. Housing indicators are measures that Statistics Canada uses to determine whether households are experiencing housing issues. And there are 3 key housing issues that they typically look at. One is called suitability, one is called adequacy, and one is affordability. Just briefly put, affordability means if you're living in unaffordable circumstances, that means you're paying 30% or more of your pre-tax annual income towards housing costs. And it typically, although not always, is kind of the number one issue that we see in communities, not just in Chetwynd, but right across Peace River and right across BC is the number one issue that most households are facing is affordability. But that doesn't mean that the other two aren't worth paying attention to. Adequacy is really about the level of maintenance. Are you living in substandard housing? Does it have black mold or leaks or inadequate servicing? And so you can see in the graph on the right here that seniors households, a small group of seniors households are experiencing adequacy issues in the community. And then the final indicator is suitability. And that's really references overcrowding. Do you have enough bedrooms for the number of people in your home? And so what these graphs are really telling us is that generally speaking, across all households and especially renters, affordability is the number one issue. And a third of renters in Chetwynd are experiencing an affordability issue. And that becomes really important because it does mean that these 100 households are at risk of potentially losing their housing or experiencing housing vulnerability. Research definitely shows us that when you're paying more than you can afford on your rent, you may scale back on payments of other key things. You may not be able to afford the food that keeps your family healthy, or you may not pay bills after a couple months, and you may lose, whether it's losing your internet or losing electricity. Those are the coping strategies that households under pressure often sort of take on. And that has lots of other ripple impacts in terms of community health and well-being. So really worth highlighting that affordability piece for renters, and then to a lesser extent for owners. About 55 owner households, or 8.1% of all owners are experiencing affordability issues. And so what that basically means when we translate it into core housing need is CMHC and Statistics Canada have this kind of rigorous measure of whether you're really experiencing a housing issue. And if you are facing either an adequacy or a suitability or an affordability issue, and you cannot suitably find something else in your own community that you can afford, then you'd be considered to be in core housing need. So if you're earning $200,000 a year and living in kind of substandard housing by choice, then you would not be in core housing need. But if you fall under kind of the income threshold determined by CMHC to afford something suitable for your family, then you would be in core housing need. And so this really tells us about households in core housing need that is paying 30% to 49% of their household income towards shelter costs, and then those in extreme core housing need, or paying 50% or more of their income towards shelter costs. And so there are 95 households in Chetwynd who are currently deemed to be in core housing need as of 2016. And when we break that out by renter and owner households, that amounts to about 30 owner households in core housing need and about 65 renter households. So even though renters make up a lower proportion in number of renters, you can see that they actually experience this issue at a much higher rate, both proportionally and in terms of numbers. So it's about 21% of renters are currently in core housing need in Chetwynd versus only 4.5% of owners. Moving into the community and stakeholder engagement. So as I've mentioned earlier, we did have some public engagement through a survey. There were 37 respondents from Chetwynd to our survey overall, representing about 1.5% of the 2016 population. It's not a huge amount, but it did provide us some insight into those experiencing some housing issues. In addition to that, we had a regional focus group and then interviews completed with First Nations staff representatives, regional elected officials, service providers, housing providers, and members of the real estate and development industry across Peace River. And the idea, or the rationale there, was to really identify any challenges, barriers, or unmet needs in housing and housing-related services, to identify some potential opportunities for how local governments or other partners within the sector may be able to support some of these issues. And then that will go on to inform our potential best practices and policies. So just a quick snapshot of some of the key issues coming out of the survey for Chetwynd. So the number one issue, or the two highest issues were the cost of home purchase was too high, and there's not enough of the type of home that I was looking for. Other key issues that were looked at was the cost of rent, not being able to get financing for a home, or poor quality of the housing type I'm looking for. And the report does go into a little bit more detail on the survey. So in terms of kind of a summary of some of the key issues, housing affordability does represent a pressing issue within the community. Of the three indicators that we looked at, housing affordability was number one, particularly for renter households, who 32% of renters and 8% of owners were experiencing an affordability issue. Stakeholders supported this information by indicating that finding affordable options within the community can be challenging for single income households, and that really ties back to that graph that shows single female lone parent households and non-census families, and particularly for those on income assistance where the shelter rate is quite low. It can be a challenge. So stakeholders noted that, you know, regionally issues of accessibility in housing are getting better, but there's a need for kind of more supportive housing options, with the hospital kind of acting as a de facto support for many households or individuals experiencing long-term health issues. There is a dearth of long-term care homes, particularly for seniors within the region. And that may be one of the reasons why seniors don't stay, or there's a smaller kind of population of seniors in the north. Also noted were that individuals experiencing mental health issues do often face barriers when they're looking for housing, and that limits their ability both to find housing, but also their ability to kind of access the supports they require because they're unstably housed. Rental housing, I noted before that there's a much higher proportion of renters than owners in poor housing need. Stakeholders did indicate that a high cost and lack of availability of rental housing was one of their top concerns, and that there may be a need for additional purpose-built rental units within the community. I want to make a note about that because CMHC does track purpose-built rental units within the community, but they don't publish them for Chetwynd. In fact, the only two northern communities that they do publish that data for in Peace River are Dawson Creek and Fort St. John. And so we were quite limited in our ability to kind of dig a little deeper into the rental market, and we're not able to access that information, unfortunately. Seniors housing as a regional issue came up quite extensively in the stakeholder work. You know, the limited indicators, and I will say that they're limited due to sample size that we had in Chetwynd around seniors housing, don't show a huge number, but that, you know, there is a small number of seniors who may be kind of experiencing substandard housing, or senior households, I should say. But generally speaking, regionally, a lack of supportive housing and a lack of downsizing options were identified as an issue. And it's a bit difficult to know whether, you know, which came first. Is it that seniors are leaving the region because of a lack of housing options, or are there a lack of housing options because seniors leave the region and senior government doesn't see the need to invest as much? And so I think, you know, where the stakeholder engagement provides some strength that the numbers don't, is really emphasizing the need for those options. Even though there are proportionally fewer seniors in Peace River, nonetheless, the community is identifying it as a need that needs to be pursued. And then housing for families, you know, I think generally speaking, based on the affordability of kind of home ownership in Chetwynd, families are generally quite well served by the housing choices available to them in the community. It's those single income households like lone parents or non-census families that may have more of a challenge entering into the market. And finally, homelessness was not explicitly identified as a major issue by stakeholders in the community. But that being said, there are also limited services in the community for individuals experiencing homelessness, and we know that the numbers tend to pop up in the service centers more. Even while people are transient between communities, they may be going to places like Dawson Creek to access services. And so maybe it's not that they're not in Chetwynd, it's just simply that they may be less visible there. So just to summarize, we are kind of in the process of doing this series of presentations to board and councils to receive input and questions and comments. We're aiming to finalize these reports over the next 6 weeks or so. And then through January and February, we'll be looking at some policy responses, working with our working group and with our steering committee to kind of vet those and bringing those back in front of this council and the other partner member municipalities and regional district again, prior to finalization of that next report, which would be the policy report. That is the end of my presentation. I think I've covered off this slide, but I would be happy to address questions, I think. Should there be any?
Questions, Laura?
Yeah, I just have one quick one. Just a couple slides before the end, you said something, CMHC do reporting in Dawson and Fort St. John. Can you just explain that a little bit more? What kind of reporting are you talking about?
So they have this data set that they publish. It's called the Rental Market Survey, and it tends to be for larger communities. I think they don't always cut it off at 10,000, but a lot of the communities are 10,000 or over. It is accessible. Like you can go to their housing market information portal, and it's fairly easy to navigate. You can kind of click on your region in the map. But what they don't publish are any of the rental figures for smaller communities like Chetwynd, like Pouce Coupe, like Hudson's Hope. So where in Dawson Creek we have information on kind of what's going on in purpose-built rentals, what the costs are, where the vacancy rates are at. We don't have that information for Chetwynd. And it's just, it's a limitation. It's something we see in lots of smaller communities. I mean, my own hometown of Gibsons is also excluded from that data that's published.
So it's just because of the size of our community.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions for Matt? Clay?
Just a couple. Did you identify what are supplies like for low income people?
Yeah, we do. So I mean, that's really kind of the overlap between the rental market, what's available in the rental market, and kind of non-market housing. I don't believe. Hold on. In the report, we do document for each of the communities that we're working with whether BC Housing has a relationship with any housing providers. And so that would be non-market housing, and that should be in the report. Let's see if I can pull up that section. And then, typically, in a lot of smaller and northern communities, the low income housing is served by the private market. It tends to be older rental housing stock, right? Purpose-built rental housing stock that was built in the 70s or 80s. That is the kind of form of housing that is most accessible and affordable to lower income households and earners. Typically, so we did capture 51 units that were counted that were non-market units that come in as essentially affordable housing in Chetwynd. 3 of which were emergency shelters, 6 were transitional supported or assisted living. 31 were independent social housing, that is housing for either seniors or families. And then 11 were rent assistance subsidies in the private market provided by BC Housing.
Okay, and did that come out as being adequate for the community?
No, so those would be individuals or households that aren't served. So when we look at core housing need by tenure type, when we see kind of there are these 65 households who are renters, and I think the additional 30 who are owners, they're the ones that would need additional housing supports, particularly the renters. It's a little harder for kind of non-market solutions for people that own their own asset because they're essentially sitting on their asset and they could sell if they so chose. But for that group of 65 kind of renter households, they're the folks that are in core housing need and therefore probably needing additional non-market supports, whether that's in the form of a subsidy or a new housing development. I think probably would need a little bit more conversation with the nonprofit sector, but that's that group of folks in need.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to crack down on is, so we have the Cottonwood Court, and is it enough? And my concern is that the data could be skewed. My concern is when you had that slide up and the average income for single females is $40,000, and can somebody like that get adequate housing in Chetwynd? And how many people are staying in unhealthy or / abusive relationships just because they can't afford to live on their own? Do we have the needs for that type of demographic?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, like this is one of the limitations that we have with smaller communities and the data sets that just aren't available. And certainly I think it's a challenge that we've experienced in some of the communities in Peace River. I would suggest that based on the stakeholder information, based on what we see in other communities, that I think you're right to point out the challenge that female lone parent-led families often experience. We know in the work that we've done kind of provincially around homelessness as well, that women tend to cope not by going to the street, but as you say, maybe staying in abusive relationships or in otherwise sort of unhealthy conditions because they don't always have the same kind of level of income or the same resources and supports. So I think, if we're to try to do any cross analysis, I would say that that lone parents are probably female lone parents are the most vulnerable renter households, and they do tend to be primarily renters because of their income, as well as kind of individuals renting alone, particularly kind of older adults on a fixed income or people on disability or income assistance would be the groups that we'd see as being in need. And I would posit that probably those 65 households of renters who are in core housing need would be primarily composed of those groups.
Okay, any more questions for Matt? Okay. I don't see any more questions. Matt, I got one about how long has Urban Systems been involved in with this study here? Have you been?
So we are. We are Urban Matters. We're a sister company of Urban Systems. Yeah. So we have been. We've been involved in this project in Peace River since June. That's when we had our kickoff. But we've done other work in the region as well. We did a seniors housing needs assessment in Hudson's Hope a couple of years ago, and are currently kind of working with one of their housing societies on a housing development there. In terms of more broadly speaking, the company working on housing needs assessment, I've been working as a housing planner for a decade independently, and I joined Urban Matters about 3 years ago. Our company itself is only 5 years old, so we're new, kind of a new incorporation, but I joined in 2017.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Okay, thank you for that presentation and legislation and all that. That's kind of things that we have to pay attention to. And it's quite good information that we could have a look at and decide what, if anything, that we can do on our part as mayor and council and staff. So thank you for that, Matt. It is quite interesting. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, bye. Okay. Carrying on, we have B1 bylaws, District of Chetwynd Solid Waste Collection and Disposal Service Amendment Bylaw number 1125 2020 requires first, second, and third reading.
Motion to move first, second, and third reading.
Second that.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, carried. B2, District of Chetwynd Water Fees Charges and Regulation Amendment Bylaw Number 1126/2020 requires first, second, and third reading.
I'll make that motion.
Janet? I need a second.
I'll second that.
Clay? Thanks, Rochelle, but Clay's got it. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, all those in favor? Me, thank you. Okay, B3, District of Chetwynd Sewer Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw Number 1126/2020 requires first, second, and third reading.
Motion to receive first, second, and third readings.
Need a second? Okay, Laura, thank you. All those in favor?
Is this bylaw 3?
Yes, this is B3, yep, bylaw 3.
I think you
You had a
said
question on it?
1126, didn't you?
Pardon me?
I thought you said 1126. It should be 1127.
27,
Or
yeah,
sorry.
we did 112, yeah, I read 27, yeah. Yeah, we did 1127, correct. Okay, all those in favors, carried. Okay, any community reports to be had here? Jocelyn, we'll start with you.
I just have a quick little update on the Heritage Museum. I went to their AGM last week and 2 people showed up other than me. So Myra Grosniak and Alma Templeton are going to do a membership drive, and they are going to try and carry the society for this year. But if they don't get any membership, they won't be continuing after this year. So spread the word. They need some help.
Okay, yeah, hopefully by the time we get to that point, there might be some movement in our being able to hold meetings with public to attend regular meetings. Hopefully that takes place prior to them making that decision. Hopefully it doesn't happen. Yeah, we will spread the word. Thank you, Jocelyn. Any more for any reports? I see we get a report from Carol that has our weekly report. So with some of that stuff that goes on, Carol, myself and you will get together and we will put that in our mayor's report for the following month, I guess, in December for what we did for the year. So we will just get a summary going and we will put that into paper and we will have that. And Clay, if you don't mind, would you put one, if you have some for the mayor's report, yeah, just put it from Councillor Bazandowski for this month, if you don't mind.
What's that, sorry?
My question is if you wouldn't mind putting in a report in the mayor's report, but just from Councillor Bazandowski on what happened in your department and just a little bit of what went on in Chetwynd, if you don't mind. It could be for a month, it could be for a couple months, whatever you feel, because have you put a report in prior to me sitting on council? Did you have
the last mayor asked me to put one out every now and again. So usually if I had something on my brain, I would just send it to him. And then when he had a slow time, he might use it and whatnot. So
do you mind putting one out for November here before the end of the month?
I could do that, and I could work on something for year end too. If everybody wanted to maybe email me a few of the highlights that they wanted to talk about, I could. I enjoy writing every now and again, so I could put something together.
Council? Sounds good?
Thanks, Clay.
Yep. Okay, perfect. We will, if there isn't any other reports, we will continue. We have some discussion items. Well, we have one. the virtual BC Natural Resource Forum registration forms.
I can make that resolution if you like.
Yes,
That council authorize all members of council to attend the virtual BC Natural Resource Forum, January 26th to June 28th, 2021.
I would second that.
okay. Discussion? Clay?
It's good to have the option for us all to go, but can we just ensure that it's going to be attended by at least a couple of us? I think it's pretty important that, I know it's optional, but
I plan on going into it.
oh, good.
Yeah. So 3 of us anyway, Clay, and any other councils are welcome through this motion. So anyway, all those in favor? Did we have a second, by the way? Did we have a second for that? I guess we did. We're discussing
Yes.
it. Yeah, we did. Okay, good. All those in favor? Okay, carried. Correspondence. Letter from the Ministry of Finance. So did everybody get a chance to read the letter? It says, Dear Mayor Coutre, thank you for your delegation for meeting at the Minister's Finance during the virtual Union of British Columbia Municipalities annual convention. So it goes on to say they took our information and they're going to pass it on to the next. So if we have any more information that we need to talk about, we will get it to you immediately. And if any other councillors have any information for us, if we have a meeting date with them, we will get together and we will chat about this. This one's quite important to us. Anybody have anything on this letter? We're good with that? Okay. Canada Post, the letter from Canada Post dated just information that on their hours of operation. I asked the CAO, Carol, if we would put this in our information in the Chetwynd, is it our webpage, Carol?
Yeah, so we can definitely do that.
If that's all right with council. Go ahead, Janet.
I just have a comment.
Yes.
I'm sure everybody got the card in their mail. I know I did.
Mhm.
Just letting us know that Canada Post extended hours are well, I guess the letter says effective November 1st, but the card in the mail says effective November 30th through December 23rd. And the hours are extended beyond what the letter says. So if we're going to share that information anywhere, I would like to yeah, just edit it, show what the flyer said.
Yep. Some of the information like this, when it comes through Carol, maybe we, or through our office, maybe we should, I don't know, can we do anything about this, Carol, that it gets out soon as we receive it? Because this is not information that we need to either bring to our council every time, because we're 2 weeks late on it already, right? If we bring it to council. Is this quite important to, people that, to have this information, if they read our posts on our information, that, because it seems like we got it from the mail and then there's a different one, as Janet pointed out. So can we just put this stuff on our post without coming to council? That's a question I'm asking, Carol.
Oh, yeah. So generally, because it's a third party, they make their hours and whatnot known themselves. We do help them out by putting it on our council agenda, or as council asked, we can put it on our webpage as well. But generally, a third party like this would do their own advertising. I mean, I certainly don't think it's a mistake to help them out a little bit, but as a rule, it would usually go on a council's agenda, and that way they do get some extra promotion, unless council, directs me otherwise.
Okay. Did I see, Janet, did you have another question? No, we're good. So anyway, do we want to just throw this on our information? Yes, no?
It doesn't matter to me, sure.
Does it bother anybody if we throw this on there and because our meetings are every 2 weeks, right? So sometimes we hit the number right on where we put it on and after our Monday meeting, then it's okay. But this one, it's a couple of weeks late.
Well, if we're going to put it on, we just need to verify the information is all, like what Janet said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got that, Carol? We've got that other information that Janet pointed out to us. Okay. Good. So do we need a motion, Carol?
No, I think I've got direction. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Information items.
Motion to receive I-1 to 9.
Second,
Second, Janet. Okay. All those in favor? Carried. Reports to action, RA1. We've got a meeting schedule. Does everybody look at it?
I'll make the recommendation that the 2021 regular council meetings be held in the council chambers at 4:30 p.m. on the listed dates. Sorry, and also that the 2021 council meeting schedule be made available to the public by posting a copy at the municipal office.
I'll second that.
Mel, second. Okay, all those in favor? Gary? RA2, deputy mayor appointment.
I can make that recommendation, that the following council members be appointed to deputy mayor for the designated periods of 2021 as listed below.
I would second that.
Clay, second. Okay, all those in favor? Gary? Council appointments, Civic Properties Commission.
Did you miss one?
Yeah.
Which one did that? R4? Okay, all right, PRD, okay, correct. Thanks, Clay. Okay, the PRD.
I'll make that recommendation that Mayor Coutre be appointed as director and Councillor Deck be appointed as alternate director to the Peace Region Regional Board for 2021.
I would second that.
Any discussion? Mel, good?
Yep, all good.
Okay. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, RA4. Here we go.
I'll make the recommendation that council authorize the following council representatives to be appointed to the Civic Properties Commission for 2021. Mayor Coutre and Councilors Bazandowski and Moore.
Second.
Okay, Jocelyn, second. Discussion, all those in favor? Carried. 2021 council committee appointments.
Make the recommendation council members be formally appointed to committees, boards, and commissions for 2021 as outlined on attachment A to this report.
I would second that.
Okay, any discussion on this? Okay. All those in favor? Carried. Appointment of auditor.
I would make that motion that the chartered accounting firm of Sander, Rosebone Grindle LLP be appointed as auditors for the District of Chetwynd for 2021.
I'll second that.
Jen, second. Any discussion? Yeah, I just had a question for maybe Kevin. How have they done in the last few years? They've been our auditor for a while.
Yes, they've been the auditor here for probably 15 years now, maybe a little bit more. They've been really good to deal with. I've been happy with them, so.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Chetwynd and area childcare space creation analyst and action plan.
I'll make the recommendation that council endorse the Chetwynd and area childcare space creation analysis and action plan.
I would second that.
Thank you. Discussion?
I have a question.
Laura?
So where does this report go now, Carol? Like, well, what happens to this report?
This report has a number, oh, sorry, could I speak?
Yes, go ahead, Carol.
So this report has a number of recommendations. You may have noticed, and although we phoned around to the different child care facilities and found that there are spots available right now, but that might be an anomaly because of COVID. So it has a number of recommendations that we could follow in coming days. For instance, for a committee to continue to look at childcare creation. But the very fact that we have this report will now make it easier for those daycares and childcare centers to apply for extra funding, because we've now got our sort of our bases. So a lot of funding administrators will look at that favorably. So it opens up more opportunities and more doors for daycare in this town.
Okay,
Good
thank you.
question, Laura. Any more? Okay, not seeing any. All those in favor? Okay, carried. Okay, reports for information, building permit values.
I would make that motion that the report be received for information.
I'll second it.
Laura, second.
Yeah, I have a question on
Any
that.
discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Laura.
I'm just curious, what, in June, we had an institution, money there. What would that be? Institutional? Can someone answer that?
Yeah, could I ask Alex to expand on that a bit?
I
Yeah,
was
go
going to
ahead.
kick it back to you, actually. I'm not too sure at the moment. I can get back to council, though, with an answer tomorrow.
Okay, Laura, is that fine?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's, I
Okay,
was just curious.
email Carol and she'll get it to everybody, Alex. Okay, that's fine. Okay, good. Any more questions on the permits? Okay, we're good. Okay, see, it was 7,545.51. So is that a good number? Or have we been higher? Have we been lower? Kevin?
I would say yes to both questions. We have had higher and we have had lower.
Like millions of dollars higher?
No, it's actually about half of what we budgeted for 2020. So we're a little bit low on our budget.
Okay, that's good information. Okay, thank you. And no more questions. All those in favor? Carried. There was no new business and there was no public on, Carol?
There was not, no.
Oh, okay. Looking for adjournment?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, thanks, council. Thank you, staff.
Good night, everybody. Be safe.
Have a good night.